that's the pride that I take in what I put out there for my clients and for myself. I want to make sure that the polished product is that it's polished.
Right. Right.
It's not filled with blemishes, which leads me into my next question. How do you feel about podcasts that get published unedited?
Mm. So this is where my sunny and bubbly disposition might go out the window a little bit. So I this is a polarizing topic, as you know, and as you alluded to at the beginning, and I feel very strongly about this. Clearly, everyone does pretty much who is
Mhm.
actually in the industry, but I honestly, the word that comes to mind for me when somebody puts out like a raw, unedited show is disrespectful, because it is absolutely disrespectful to your listener to make them listen to something that is not good. And if you leave in all of that filler, all of that fluff, all of the stumbles, all the mouth noises, background noises, it's just not good. Not to say it's bad. In some cases, it can be okay, but it's certainly not good. And it honestly wastes the listener's time, like literally waste their time. Because, for example, I mean, I can take a 60-minute episode and cut out 10 minutes, and I don't do content edits unless I'm specifically asked. So that's 10 minutes of fluff, filler, false starts, stutters, when somebody doesn't have an actual stutter, of course. So all of that stuff, I have gotten rid of it, and I just gave the listener 10 minutes back of their time. And that is huge. I mean, that's something else they could go do. That's more content they can consume. For people like me who listen before they fall asleep, that's 10 extra minutes of sleep they can get. So it's really, really important, I think, to respect your listener's experience and their time. And if you're not putting any effort into cleaning up your audio, then you're just not doing that.
Bravo, Brittany. That is about as well said as it can possibly be said. Listeners of this show know that the cardinal rule or the golden rule of podcasting is that it's all about the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you were spot on in saying that if the listener has to try to absorb just just the shit that doesn't belong,
Right.
it's not it's not going to create the best experience, and it's not going to want to make them come back for more. And
Absolutely.
and I can think of myself as a listener and not as a producer or an editor, and that's exactly how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell a story real quick. I had gotten reached out to by a gentleman who wanted to have me on his show, and without I learned from this. I didn't do any research. I just said, "Yeah, sure, I could come on and talk about this, this, and this." And then I went and listened, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh God, this was a mistake." And now
Right.
I feel bad, and I can't back out now. Well, then he no showed the interview, so I
Oh,
got
okay.
out of it. But I learned from there. Always listen first to make sure that these guys have their ducks in a row.
Right.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that as a listener, you may not always pick up on it may slide through, but if it's in there as filler to where it's not leading right into the sentence, to where as an editor you should be able to cut it out without anybody ever knowing it was there to begin with, and that's your
Absolutely.
job.
Yep.
That's what you should be doing, because the final product is supposed to sound professional. And
Right.
if you leave that in there, it makes it sound like amateur hour. And that's where I've had conversations with people that say that it doesn't make the conversation sound like it's natural and that it's flowing. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
I call BS.
Absolutely.
Because as an editor, you should be able to make it sound like a professional, or I should actually sound like an actual conversation.
Yes.
That's what you're putting. That's what people are putting their faith in you to do.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
what do you
Whenever
say to
those
the
people,
well, I was gonna say, what do you say to the people that say, oh, leave because it disrupts the conversation? What are your thoughts on that?
so again, I might piss some people off here, but the people who say that, I think that they're in two boats. One, they're either making an excuse for why they just don't want to learn how to edit, which I get. Like, it's a lot, it's overwhelming, it's time consuming, but just own that that's the reason why. Don't try and play it off like it's natural, because it's not. Or two, they're not good at editing. And so it does sound unnatural when they try to do it because they're making bad cuts.
Mhm.
And you can tell that something was removed. But a good editor will remove what a lot of us call low hanging fruit. we'll get all the stuff that's super easy to cut out. Then no one knows you're there. No one knows anything was removed. It sounds completely natural. It flows perfectly. And then you're still left with roughly about 20% of those uhs and ums because you can't get every single one
Right.
perfectly every time. So you do have those natural ones in there. And then there are instances where they need to be left because they do contribute something to the conversation. And if you remove them, you actually are changing the tone of the conversation. So that's where having a good editor who understands those subtle nuances is super important. But for the average podcaster, just, trying to learn to do it for their own show, just understand that there's a learning curve and you don't quite get all those nuances yet, but don't try and pass it off like, oh, my show's just not going to sound natural.